Hey, it's Drybear. With the release of Stalker 2 just coming out tomorrow, I wanted to do a recap of the Stalker lore, Stalker universe, and everything that you need to have floating around in your head before you dive into Stalker 2. So whether you're someone who is a fan of the series and just needs a refresher, or if you're someone, which a lot of people seem to be, have never played a Stalker game before but are starting with Stalker 2, I want to get you set up with a background and history of the game so you know what you're walking into. Now, lots of people have their own conceptions about what Stalker is about. And I think there's probably the majority of people, at least that are watching this video, are probably in the camp of, I have friends or I know of people that are very big fans of Stalker, but I've never actually played the game myself, nor have I really kind of grasped the story. And I think from that perspective, if you're in that camp, you're probably looking at Stalker as a realistic shooter game with some minor horror / sci-fi elements. And it's kind of just like, okay, yeah, there's radiation that's causing reality to shift, and there's lots of gunfighting and people fighting. But realistically, that's actually not what the story of Stalker is about, and it goes way deeper than any of that. See, Stalker actually started just like our world is today, where there is the very famous incident of the Chernobyl disaster. It is considered the largest nuclear disaster in human history. It is not the only, but it is the largest. So a series of events took place in Pripyat with the Chernobyl nuclear reactor that caused it to go into a serious meltdown and start destroying itself, which caused tons of radiation to blow off the roof of the reactor and spew out into the air. This made the area around the Chernobyl reactor unable to be inhabited by any living being. It was highly radioactive, and it was called the Chernobyl exclusion zone, where you just couldn't be around that without nuclear protective gear because it was highly, highly dangerous. And that's actually how the world of Stalker started. In the 80s with the Chernobyl disaster, the exclusion zone was lined out for everybody, and then that is where the first game, the Clear Sky prequel, begins. However, there was some very strange turn of events as the outside of the world was looking into the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which was becoming this kind of very mystical place that some people wanted to go to just for morbid curiosity. It was also kind of interesting to watch nature reclaim modern areas that had been completely abandoned by mankind. But then one day, something very strange happened. A large lightning storm occurred inside of the exclusion zone. A really huge wave of red light occurred as well. And when this blast of radiation came out of the exclusion zone, the zone got bigger by about 5 to 10 kilometers. So something that shouldn't be happening was actually happening. And when this blast, this red wave of radioactive energy came out, birds started dying instantly and falling out of the sky, animals fell over dead, and many of the people that were near the zone or in the zone were completely wiped out by this experience. And so from the outside, the world was starting to wonder what was going on inside of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Was it really just the exclusion zone of radiation? This should just be an area that's radioactive, but doesn't have these weird, strange, crazy events happening inside of it. And from that first event where this emission that comes out of the zone happens, they continued to happen. Animals were dying, crazy things were happening, and the zone was getting bigger. Now, as the zone becomes more interesting, I started calling out to people that wanted to get inside the zone and were just interested in seeing what was going on in there. There were these crazy anomalies that were occurring where gravity would flip upside down, certain objects would change in direction or in properties. There was fires that would rage without any actual fuel or oxygen required. Electric storms would appear and rage on without any of the weather requirements to make them function, and tons of deformations, mutations, and everything was happening inside of the zone, which again is not what you would expect from just a basic area that was radioactive. But not only that, the anomalies were occurring inside of the zone, but there was also this new discovery of artifacts, these items, these objects that were exhibiting crazy otherworldly effects, but they could be held, they could be carried, they could be handled, and a big surge of interest for these artifacts came out, where many corporations, organizations globally were wanting people to go into the zone, collect these artifacts, and return them, and were paying exorbitant prices to get these so that they could fund their research or fuel new ideas with these crazy new distortions in reality. But it was kind of a tall ask, considering the fact that many people that wanted to go into the zone to get the artifacts and retrieve them were not willing to risk their life. There was violent criminals inside of the zone. There were these distortions, mutants, and anomalies that could kill you on the spot. Most people that were willing to go into the zone were of the same type. People that didn't really have a future outside of the zone. Criminals, people that were running from the law, they didn't have a home to call their own from any area in the world, and they were looking for a place that no one else was willing to go so they could find their own peace. And this is where the idea of Stalker was born. Stalker is not a word, it is actually an acronym, and it refers to the kind of people that are willing to go into the exclusion zone, risk their life for this area. The Stalker acronym stands for Scavengers, Trespassers, Adventurers, Loners, Killers, Explorers, and Robbers. The only kinds of people that are willing to throw their lives away and risk it all to go into the zone are people that fit into one of those camps, and they were referred to from then on as the Stalkers. But the most concerning aspect about the zone is that it wasn't staying static. These emissions, as they were called, these large outbursts of radiation, destroying things, distorting the land, and causing more anomalies to appear, started to become more and more frequent, and the zone was continuing to expand, where most of the governments around the world were very concerned that the zone would continue to expand until it consumed the entire world. And so not only were these drifters, these stalkers, interested in going to the zone, but also more governments were too, to try and figure out if they could stop the expansion of the zone. And so they started commissioning military stalkers that were, full military outfitted adventurers or military outlets that were coming to investigate the zone and then go to the center of the zone and stop or destroy whatever was sending out these deadly emissions and whatever was causing this zone to expand. In the first game, you are a stalker. This is the original game from 2007. You are a stalker that has lost his memory. You have a tattoo on your arm that says Stalker, but you don't really know who you are or what's going on. You just know that you're looking for a particular stalker. And this is where the basis of the game comes about. The two other games are a prequel with Clear Sky, and then of course with Call of Pripyat was more of a sequel that was a follow-up to the story overall. But it starts out very unassuming, and it's a thing that a lot of people enjoy about the Stalker games, is the fact that it just drops you into a world that feels alive, that feels like it exists with or without you. You aren't the MVP, you aren't the main character of the story, you're just someone who's there, part of the world that exists around you. And as you push through the story, you think that you're part of some world where there's just some crazy radioactive events going on, but you start to realize that there is a deep story as part of this universe. Quickly find out that inside of the zone there are several factions, groups of people that have different ideals that all came about through different ways. So let's walk through the different groups that you'll run into. And in some of the Stalker games, you are able to join one of these factions and fight against the others, but you want to know going into Stalker 2, which of these groups believe what and where they came from. Some of the first folks to go to the center of the zone were part of a military outfit. They were sent by outside governments to find out what was at the center of the zone and what was causing the emissions to come out and cause the zone to expand. However, this first group of military folks came in completely unprepared for what was going to happen next. See, they went in as a military outfit expecting to fight humans, but what they found was a constant supply of anomalies, things that would burn you alive, melt the skin off of your arms and face, things that would cause your mind to distort and break down, as well as electric storms, falling rocks, landslides, and all kinds of crazy events. They were just simply not equipped to handle the anomalies that were going on on and the dangers they presented. And so understandably, this military outfit was nearly wiped out. There were survivors that survived this first little bit, but they were stranded inside of the zone and they were caught by surprise by the horrors and evil that they found in the zone as well. And since then, another several rounds of military outfits were dropped into the zone. Even one of them was airdropped from a plane right over the reactor, and the same thing happened. Most of them ended up getting wiped out, with some survivors banding together, and all of these military outfits that came together at the end bonded to form a group which is now known as Duty. Duty is a group of ex-military trained professionals, and they believe very starkly that the zone is evil. Their goal in life, their goal inside the zone, is to find, eradicate, and if they can't eradicate, contain all the evil that exists inside the zone. All of the anomalies, all of the mutants, all of the rogue stalkers and criminals, they believe that they are the form of justice. Duty focuses on keeping the zone civil and trying to contain and otherwise destroy anything in the zone and prevent it from escaping out into the real world. But some of that comes from their military background and what they aimed to accomplish by entering into the zone. But the zone drew a bunch of other folks from the outside world. Like I said, criminals, adventurers, killers, looters, opportunists, the kinds of people that wouldn't fit in a normal society found their way into the zone and found a home in the zone because there was no governing body. Most official governments and organizations were not equipped to handle living in the zone, so for the most part, they stayed away from it, and the zone became a lawless wasteland outside of any duty camps that tried to keep order. And this drew a lot of people to the zone that didn't have anywhere else to go, or they were sanctioned somewhere, or they were about to go to jail, and this created a way for them to find a free area where they could be themselves. No one could tell them what to do. No one could tell them how to live. They wanted to live in a free area that was, in their eyes, a gift to the world. They actually saw the zone as a brand new place to exist as humankind, and they wanted to live an unrestricted life without any rules from any outside bodies. And so they were the ones that were wanting to keep and provide and extend the life of the zone and protect it from that perspective. And this group eventually became known as Freedom. Freedom is the group of people that is a collection of individuals that believe that the zone should be maintained, that the expansion of the zone is good for the world, and that it is a place that should be given its own sovereignty because being here is different than anywhere else on the planet. And if you can join the zone and be part of it, then it's something that is unique and experience that should be protected. So Freedom is essentially the complete opposite of Duty. Duty wants to keep the zone civil, and they want to destroy and contain anything in the zone from getting out and destroying our normal way of life. And Freedom wants to live in it forever and keep anyone like Duty out, which obviously means that Freedom and Duty are in eternal war with each other. Next, you have a very loose description of a group of people, and that is going to be the Bandits. This is a loose description of anyone that doesn't belong to any of the official factions. They just kind of exist in the zone. Their agreements and truces are very paper thin. If they find anything of value, they're very likely to kill you or kill each other or kill anything to take the money that they want. They constantly try to rob people. They're looking for any opportunity they can. And this is basically just a conglomerate of all the criminals and scum of the universe that want to find a place where they don't have any laws preventing them from living the life that they want. The Bandits roam freely. They can go from place to place. They can try and take over compounds, but bandits are everywhere, and they are basically just the bad guys of the zone. Now, to understand the last group that you need to know about, we need to talk about the core story of Stalkers. So there's one more faction that you need to know about, but we'll circle back right after we talk about what actually was going on in the zone. Now, we talked about the anomalies appearing, the zone expanding, strange things happening, groups of people being sent into the zone, most of them getting wiped out, and these crazy emissions that were going on, destroying all life and mutating life forms as well. But there was a little bit more to it than that in the Stalker universe. As you got closer and closer to the zone, it became harder and harder to survive. See, near the center of the zone, there was a research group and a giant tower or series of antennae that were connected together that everyone in the zone knew as the brain scorcher. This was constantly sending out these crazy waves that were interacting with people that got close to it. In fact, the majority of people that got too close to the brain scorcher ended up becoming what was effectively a zombie. They could sometimes maintain some level of speech. They could still operate weaponry and walk around and navigate gates and doors and things like that, but they shambled. Their motor function was very limited, and most of them couldn't speak very well. These were the zombies of the zone, and these were basically anyone that got close to the brain scorcher, the giant antenna in the center. And as you explore the first game, you discover what's near the brain scorcher. You make your way past it, only to find out at the center of the research group, at the center of the zone, was not a reactor, but rather a group of scientists that had been secretly experimenting with a brand new discovery that was earth-shattering. See, these researchers had found a new atmosphere level called the noosphere, which was very similar to discovering like wormholes, something crazy powerful. It was a level outside of the atmosphere of Earth that affected emotion. It was something that controlled brain waves and impacted humankind in major ways. And so what they wanted to do was to study this noosphere by connecting their consciousness together to be able to eliminate the negative side of humanity. They initially started their research looking to eliminate hate and greed and violence and destruction and crime and all of that. And so they linked themselves together using the brain scorcher to mind control as many people as they could to eliminate the negative sides of humanity. And as we know from every major sci-fi movie, this never goes the way that they expected. And you find out in the first game that actually all of the anomalies, the emissions coming out of the zone, the growth of the zone was not because Chernobyl exploded, but rather because this group of researchers were messing with time and space and the noosphere, trying to create a brand new race of humanity that was free of fear and hate. And this is where our fourth faction comes in, because the researchers that were at the center of the zone conducting this research obviously were very afraid of military factions, groups, bandits, and all the like coming in and interrupting their research and causing violence around them. And since they themselves were not equipped for combat, they needed an armed force that would protect them. And this was the force that came to be known as Monolith, which essentially was just well-equipped individuals that had wandered too far into the center of the zone and had been taken over by mind control and were being used by the researchers to defend their active work at the center of the zone. But because the Monolith were so incredibly mind controlled, they were fearless. They didn't care what happened to them. They were exceptionally effective and were some of the most feared folks in the zone. And most of the time, people never wanted to run into Monolith because they were just super enhanced, mind controlled elite soldiers that would destroy anything and everything in their path. And now, understanding the four different groups, the folks that want to protect the zone and preserve it forever, the folks that see the zone as evil and want to destroy it or contain it, the people that are just criminal scum walking the zone, doing whatever it is that they please, satisfying their every desire, and then mind-controlled zombie elite soldiers that are there to protect the secret researchers that are the cause of all of the zone's problems in the first place. You can imagine that from an outside perspective, you don't know which group you're going to run into, and most likely you're going to run into some hostility. So the view of stalkers, the people that walk the zone from the outside, was incredibly hostile. In fact, most of the time, any inside group or outside group developed a kill on sight mentality because you probably were right about doing that, since they were probably going to kill you first. It became this harsh area where everyone was willing to loot from each other, everyone was losing their minds, and crazy things were happening all over the place. And on top of that, these rare artifacts of crazy power were being discovered, looted, transported, and exported outside of the zone to be sold for extreme riches. Then at the end of the first game and the wrap up for the Stalker trilogy, the main character, the main Stalker, makes it to the end, finds the group of scientists that were messing with the noosphere and causing these emissions and anomalies to appear. And one of the options for your story endings is to eliminate them and stop their work in general. However, unfortunately, leading into Stalker 2, this did not have a positive reaction. Removing the scientists that were messing with the noosphere did not make the anomalies go away. It did not make the atmosphere return to normal, and it did not make the emissions stop. Instead, it caused them to amplify in intensity and frequency. The whole entire geography of the zone changed and warped. The anomalies increased in frequency. The emissions started happening more often. And now that the source of the emissions was gone, the zone took on a mind of its own. And that's where we are walking into Stalker 2. In fact, we've seen trailers so far showing people that talk about their time potentially with Monolith, where they weren't making their own decisions. It felt like they were mind controlled, the Monolith soldiers that were defending the scientists. We've seen these anomalies get bigger and more intense than anything we've seen in the previous games, as well as some of the pre-existing factions still existing in all of these trailers. And one of the trailers mentions that this was 10 years after. Now, whether that's 10 years after the explosion at Chernobyl, 10 years after the first emission, or 10 years after the end of the Call of Pripyat game, regardless, this is going to be a sequel in timeline. This takes place after the research group has been eliminated and the zone started going haywire. Crazy new anomalies are appearing, lots of new things are happening, and you're not really sure whether the zone is stable and what the political standing is for all of the groups inside. Now, a couple things you'll want to know about going into Stalker 2 is the general tools of the trade that you'll see returning in the sequel, and that is going to be your infinite ammo bolt that you see on screen, as well as the devices that come along with it. The bolt it really could just be anything, but it is the franchise-defined item that is used to test out anomalies. It is an item that is metallic, so it holds a charge. It's heavy enough so that gravity would affect it, and oftentimes you will throw it into anomalies to see what happens without entering it yourself, because if you walk blindly into an anomaly, it can end up killing you on the spot. And so the bolt is an infinite ammo item that you'll have available to your character, and you just use it to walk near anomalies, throw it in, and see what happens. Is it a gravity anomaly? Is it an electric storm anomaly? Does it catch on fire? And it is your way to safely test the area in front of you, because not all anomalies are easily seen by the naked eye. You'll have to test it with a bolt to see what's going on. The device in your left hand is an artifact tracker, and there are actually multiple levels of this that we've seen in the trailers and have existed in previous games. The one you see now is the base level. All this will do is beep when an artifact is nearby. You're looking for these special powered up artifacts that will give you new powers, crazy bonuses, affect your stats, make you run fast, things like that, and also super valuable that you can sell to vendors for money, which allows you to buy gear throughout the game. And so the first one is the one you see on the left with that tube inside. Looks identical in Stalker 2 based on what they've shown us, and this will just beep faster and faster as you get closer to an artifact. Keep in mind that some artifacts are not visible until you're right upon them. So you'll walk forward, it'll start beeping, you don't see anything, it beeps faster and faster and faster, and eventually you get right on top of the artifact and it becomes visible and you can pick it up and put it in your inventory. So this will allow you to track it. But there are better versions of this tracker. There is a bear tracker, which will show general direction and of the artifacts. There's even an elevated version beyond this, which will have multiple tracking of multiple anomalies in different areas, so you want to make sure that you're using those effectively. Mutants will scale up in power. Some can be invisible, some can have crazy psionic powers, and anomalies will be interacted with in different ways. You might have to shoot them, destroy them, delete the cause of their anomaly, and that sort of thing. And that's part of the fun of playing a Stalker game, is running into these different encounters and trying to navigate your way through an unknown and uncertain world. But I'll leave it at that. That is the general story, background, and lore of Stalker going into Stalker 2 that you need to know, as well as some of the tools of the trade that you'll be aware of going into the game as well. So hopefully this was useful for you, and I hope you're excited about launching into the new sequel. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.